Hi, I'm Karen and welcome to my Week 8 NFL picks. We had some interesting games this past week and we have some interesting matchups this week. So let's get right to it. First game we're going to talk about is the Indianapolis Colts and the Tennessee Titans. Now, the Indianapolis Colts last week, I really don't want to talk about it, they lost 7-6 to the Saints. Now, Painter had 67 pass yards. They had 7 penalties for 49 yards. Now, they didn't play well at all. It was almost seemed like they were kind of gave up. You know, it must have been really difficult for Peyton Manning to be watching from the sidelines. He must have really just wanted to be out on that field. And, you know, it just was very difficult for them. But you know, they were getting it together. It seemed like they were due a win. They go down in New Orleans and they just fall apart. But now the Tennessee Titans, they lost 7-41 to the Texans. Hasselbeck had 104 passing yards. Locker had 12 passing yards. And they had 8 penalties for 76 yards. He was sacked 2 times, had 1 touchdown pass. And, you know, they didn't play that well either. So, with this matchup, now Chris Collinsworth of Inside the NFL, he's thinking the Colts are going to win. And Phil Simms and Warren Sapp say the Titans. So if Chris Collinsworth can go for the Colts, I'm going to be picking the Colts because they're due a win here eventually, and I'm going to be on that bandwagon because I think the Colts are going to win here, and they're due a win. They're my team. So I'm picking the Colts. Now, the next team we're going to talk about are the New Orleans Saints and the St. Louis Rams. Now, the New Orleans Saints, as we just talked about, they won 62-7 against the Indianapolis Colts. Now, Drew Brees had 325 passing yards and 5 touchdowns. They had 1 penalty for 10 yards and 1 interception. It's like they scored on every drive. They seemed to they had it. They were just on a roll. I believe that they had scored the most points off a team than any team had in over 30 years. They just did amazing. They just had everything was going right for them. And I just think we might be seeing a repeat of last week, this week against St. Louis Rams. Because now the Rams, they lost 7-34 to the Cowboys. Feely had 196 passing yards, 4 penalties for 16 yards. He was sacked 1 time. They had 2 fumbles where they lost 1. They had 1 touchdown and he was intercepted 1 time. Now, the Rams just can't seem to get anything together. They just are falling apart also, and I think you put these teams together, the Saints are definitely going to come out on top. Now, the next game that I would like to talk about would be Miami Dolphins and the New York Giants. Now, Miami Dolphins, they lost 15-18 to the Denver Broncos. Now, Moore had 197 passing yards. They had 2 penalties for 20 yards. They sacked 4 times, no interceptions. Now, they had the lead until the 4th quarter. And the Broncos did recover a onside kick for them to get the ball back and get their win. So, Miami, they lost that lead there. They were, it was a very low-scoring game, but Miami's not doing very well this season. Now, the New York Giants, they had a bye week, but in week 6, they won 27-24 over the Bills. Eli Manning had 292 passing yards. They had 7 penalties for 79 yards, no fumbles. They made 2 interceptions, but they had no interceptions. Ahmed Bradshaw had 3 touchdowns. The Giants, they're getting it together. They're on a roll. They're making things work. And I think the Giants are going to be contenders here. They're doing really well, and if they keep it up, they're going to be going far this season. So with this team, this matchup, the Giants are going to definitely walk away winners. Now, the next matchup is the Carolina Panthers and the Minnesota Vikings. Now, this is another one I kind of went back and forth with. Now, the Minnesota Vikings, Phil Simms is picking this team, but they lost 27-33 against the Green Bay Packers, who are still undefeated. Now, Ponder had 217 passing yards. They had 9 penalties for 91 yards, and he was sacked 2 times. Now, the Vikings they're getting it together. They're getting a little better. They did score 27 points off of the Green Bay Packers, so they are starting to get in a little bit of groove there. But the Carolina Panthers, they won 33-20 over the Redskins. Cam Newton had 256 passing yards. They had 13 penalties for 105 yards. He was sacked 4 times. They made 1 interception. Cam Newton had 1 touchdown run himself. He had 1 passing touchdown. They had 4 field goals, and Stewart had 1 touchdown run. But, you know, the Carolina Panthers, they're getting pretty solid. Cam Newton is, you know, it's like rookie against rookie quarterback here. And I think Cam Newton is more in the groove, and I think the Panthers are going to win. I'm agreeing with Chris Collinsworth and Warren Sapp on that one. Now, the Arizona Cardinals and the Baltimore Ravens. Now, the Arizona Cardinals lost 20-32 to the Steelers. Kolb had 272 passing yards. They had 9 penalties for 67 yards, sacked 2 times. They were intercepted 1 time. This is their 5th consecutive loss. So the Cardinals are just not doing good this season. Now, the Baltimore Ravens, they kind of were disappointment this past week. They lost 7-12 to the Jaguars. Now, it was a 1-5 team going into a 4-1 team. And Flacco had 137 passing yards. They had 10 penalties for 85 yards, 1 fumble. The Ravens just were not the team that we were used to seeing this season, and I think they're going to definitely come back from that loss, and they are going to beat the Cardinals. The next game to talk about is the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Houston Texans. Now, the Jaguars, we were just talking, they won 12-7 over the Ravens. They looked very good. Now, Gabbert had 93 passing yards. They had 6 penalties for 90 yards and 1 fumble. Jacksonville Jaguars looked really good to put this stop on the Ravens. I was very impressed with what I saw. They had, you know, they made a lot of great plays. But now you look at the Houston Texans. They won 41-7 over the Titans. Schaub had 296 passing yards. They had 6 penalties for 68 yards, no fumbles, no sacks. They made 2 interceptions, 1 for a touchdown run, and Arian Foster had 115, he ran for 115 yards. So they're doing really well, and I think the Houston Texans are going to have enough to beat the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, the Washington Redskins and the Buffalo Bills. Now, the Washington Redskins, they lost 20-33 to the Panthers. Beck had 279 passing yards. He was sacked 3 times. He threw 1 interception. They had 3 penalties for 26 yards. They made 2 fumbles and lost both fumbles. They still are not playing very well. They kind of lost the momentum that they had at the beginning of the year. Now, the Buffalo Bills had a bye week. In week 6, they lost 24-27 to the Giants. Fitzpatrick had 244 passing yards. They had 7 penalties for 75 yards and no fumbles. They just couldn't, they also lost their momentum that they had from the beginning of the year. They couldn't make their stops against the Giants. They just overpowered them. But, you know, when you put these 2 teams together, I think the Bills are going to get the winning back. Now, this one was kind of a little touch and go. The Detroit Lions and the Denver Broncos. I know who I'd like to see win and who I think. Now, the Detroit Lions won 16-23 over the Falcons. They lost 16-23 to the Falcons. Stafford had 183 passing yards. They had 10 penalties for 84 yards, sacked 3 times. This is their second loss in a row. They had 2 fumbles. They lost one of them. They made 2 interceptions, though. The Lions definitely are on a losing streak here. But Phil Simms and Warren Sapp think they're going to win this one. Now, the Denver Broncos, they won 18-15 over the Dolphins. Chris Collinsworth thinks they're going to win. Tim Tebow had 161 passing yards, no interceptions. They had 5 penalties for 30 yards. He was sacked 7 times, though. They were losing up until the 4th quarter, where after they scored and after the onside kick, they scored, went into overtime, and they won that game. And, you know, I would love to see the Denver Broncos win again, but I think the Detroit Lions are going to win. I think the Lions are going to win, but I would like to see the Broncos win. Now, the New England Patriots and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, the Patriots, they had a bye week. In week 6, they won 20-16 over the Cowboys. Brady had 289 passing yards, 5 penalties for 35 yards, 2 fumbles. They intercepted 2 times. They had an 8-yard pass to Hernandez with 22 seconds on the clock to clinch the win. So the Patriots came back at the end to take that win away from the Cowboys. Now the Pittsburgh Steelers won 32-20 over the Cardinals. Ben Roethlisberger had 361 passing yards. They had 9 penalties for 69 yards. He was sacked 2 times. They made 1 interception. And there was a 95-yard pass to Wallace, which was the longest in Steeler history. But, you know what, the Steelers are doing good. I think they've moved past their good game, bad game, good game, bad game. They've moved past that, but I don't think it's going to be enough to beat the Patriots, and the Patriots are going to win. Now, the Cleveland Browns and the San Francisco 49ers. The Cleveland Browns won 6-3 over the Seahawks. McCoy had 178 passing yards. They had 7 penalties for 48 yards. He was sacked 5 times. They had 2 field goals, one from 52 yards and one from 53 yards, and 2 of their field goals were blocked. So, low-scoring game, but the Browns did pull out the win. The San Francisco 49ers had a bye week. In week 6, they won 25-19 over the Lions. So, Smith had 125 passing yards, intercepted 1 time. They had 15 penalties for 120 yards, so a very high penalty game there. They had 1 fumble. Now the San Francisco 49ers, I don't think there's any stopping them. They're just winning and winning, and I'm not betting against the 49ers anymore because I just think the 49ers are going to just plow through this season. So there's just no question about it. 49ers are taking that game. Definitely. The 49ers got something. They got their new coach, and they got the winning bug there. Cincinnati Bengals and the Seattle Seahawks. The Cincinnati Bengals, they had a bye week. In week 6, they won 27-17 over the Colts. Dalton had 264 passing yards. They had 11 penalties for 111 yards, and they made 1 interception. They were playing very good football. Seattle Seahawks lost 3-6 to the Broncos. Whitehurst had 97 passing yards. They had 8 penalties for 68 yards. They blocked 2 field goals. They only made 1 field goal for themselves. They were stacked 3 yards. They had 2 fumbles, but they lost just 1 of them. And, you know what? I think I'm going to go with Chris Collinsworth. I think the Bengals are going to pull out this win. Dalton is just playing too good of football this season, even though Phil and Warren think Seattle's going to win. I don't think so. Now the Dallas Cowboys and the Philadelphia Eagles. The Dallas Cowboys, which all the experts on Inside the NFL are picking, they won 34-7 over the Rams. Tony Romo had 166 passing yards. They had 6 penalties for 30 yards. Sacked 2 times, 1 fumble. He was intercepted 1 time. And DeMarco Murray ran 253 yards, which is a team record, and 91-yard touchdown, which is the second longest in team history. So the Dallas Cowboys are picking up the pace, and they are doing really well. They are making big improvements here. I wanted to make sure I got those stats right there. Now the Philadelphia Eagles, they had a bye week. In week 6, they won 20-13 over the Redskins. Vic had 237 passing yards. They had 8 penalties for 60 yards, made 4 interceptions. But just because you win one game doesn't mean you're back. You just, the Redskins aren't doing that good. So you can't just say, oh, I want a team that's having a lot of problems, so I'm back. You got to beat a team that's really of substance. And I just don't think that they're going to beat Dallas, so I think Dallas is going to win. And last but not least, the San Diego Chargers and the Kansas City Chiefs. The San Diego Chargers, they lost 21-27 to the Jets. Rivers had 179 passing yards. They had 13 penalties for 95 yards. Sacked 1 time, no fumbles, made 1 interception. They were winning throughout the third 3 quarters of the game. They were intercepted 2 times, and it was the first interception of Rivers' career, is what I found out. So they were doing good. They just kind of handed that game over to the Jets at the end. And the Kansas City Chiefs, they won 28-0 over the Raiders. Castle had 161 passing yards. They had 10 penalties for 98 yards, no fumbles. They were intercepted 2 times. They had no sacks. They made 6 interceptions for 113 yards and 2 touchdowns. So basically the Raiders just handed this game over to the Kansas City Chiefs. And you know what? The Chargers are not going to hand over a second game over to another team. They may have handed it over to the Jets, but the Chargers are not going to hand it over to the Chiefs. Chargers are going to take this game. So just for a matchup, my picks are the Colts over the Titans, the Saints over the Rams, the Giants over the Dolphins, the Panthers over the Vikings, the Ravens over the Cardinals, the Texans over the Jaguars, the Bills over the Redskins, the Lions over the Broncos, the Patriots over the Steelers, the 49ers over the Browns, the Bengals over the Seahawks, the Cowboys over the Eagles, and the Chargers over the Chiefs. And the bye weeks are the Falcons, the Bears, the Packers, the Raiders, the Jets, and the Buccaneers. So those are my Week 8 picks. Enjoy your week of football, and see you next week.